Hey, bentornati, it's time to talk all things Serie A, game week 37. Andiamo. Let's start with, well, all the games kicking off at the same time on a Sunday. I want this to happen all the time from now on. It was fantastic. The drama, as I watched a 0-0 against Parma, I could not believe how high my heart rate was. It was unbelievable. Adam, it was just such a good spectacle. The later the games went on, all the drama across the stadiums, it was just unbelievable.
It was absolutely epic. I really did enjoy the games, especially as it kind of went into the second half. As we spoke offline, there was many games that were just like 0-0, 1-1. And it wasn't exciting, but it was actually enjoyable because we were watching games, but then you saw a little bit of a fan reaction because they were listening out to other results at the same time. So I think it was absolutely something that should probably happen more often, to be honest. I think Serie A have come across something that they've actually created that actually works out quite well and created a lot of drama for what we wanted, because I think part of it was there's so many clubs still up for grabs in terms of their respective journeys, whether that be survival in Serie A or whether it be kind of chasing that kind of fourth spot, or if you're going for the Scudetto race as we saw with Inter and Napoli. It was absolutely epic and I loved the drama that we had from it.
Mm-hmm. And Andrea, we kind of nailed down, let's start at the top. We kind of nailed down the Parma game for Napoli as it being a difficult game, not necessarily 3 points for them. And so it was. To be honest, as the game went on, I became more and more convinced that Parma were going to nick one and it was going to be 1-0. It seemed all up in the air.
Yeah, I think, again, it just showed the kind of panic throughout. I think those last 10 minutes, which I'm sure we'll come on to, really kind of, both teams felt it, and it was a lot of kind of panic, random plays, just it was all over the place. It was so intense. But again, it just kind of sums up Napoli again this season against these type of fixtures where they're expected to win comfortably. The running they had was comfortable enough to go on and win it. Even by now, they should have had the title sealed today. I'm sorry, on Sunday. So again, it was just panic stations, and I think Napoli showed as well that they lacked that kind of experience in that team. Although these players like McTominay do have experience to certain levels, teams obviously winning titles, yes, they had it before with Di Lorenzo and players like that, but I think the whole squad lacked that kind of characteristics to kind of not panic and kind of stay strong and go, try and stay composed. And I think as well, we saw a lot of kind of players switching out. Neres not starting for me is again, I keep saying this a lot, but Neres should be starting that last game, because if they got any chance, they need him starting. So, I think Napoli threw a lot, but at the same time, they almost gave it away. And I think it just shows that they didn't really sit in with the Conte tactic. It just went all out of hands, I think, at that moment in time.
Yeah, the game definitely went completely out of their control, and a lot of the substitutions just didn't really work or have the effect they wanted. Obviously, David Neres coming on, he had an impact, and we'll talk about that as well. But Adam, do you think it's as simple as Napoli missed Lobotka in midfield here? I feel like there just wasn't that creative spark, or as big a creative spark. I think Anguissa didn't have his best game. It felt like there was just something missing in that midfield.
Certainly a bit of control is what I would say. And Lobotka offers that. We did kind of speculate that in previous pods, especially after that Lecce game when he did get injured. And then subsequently he made an appearance for Genoa, which I thought was a bit of a surprise given the circumstances of what his injury was. And he came off within 12 minutes, which just goes to show you they rushed it in that respect. And they're probably going to miss him for what feels like the rest of the season at this stage. Don't think he will be back for the Calgary game as well. But Napoli had more than enough chances to kill off the game through Anguissa, as you mentioned, who struck the post. We've got the likes of Politano as well. Lukaku looked ineffective from what I could see. I was watching the Roma game at a time when you were watching Napoli, and obviously Andrea had multiple screens watching different games at the same time. So unfortunately, I couldn't have that set up.
Like Prime Pep in his living room, Andrea.
Yeah, exactly. But when I did flick on, it was a case of Napoli just really struggled again against a really super resilient Parma squad, and I think Christian Cheveux deserves a lot of credit for the way that he set it out. I think the only thing that was missing was a counter-attacking move from a Parma perspective to potentially nick it, because I think they had it within them. I think they had the players potentially that were willing runners. I just feel like they were just lacking someone that could just put the ball in the back of the net, and that was the moral of the story for Parma. And look, Parma, for them, obviously that was a really hard fought point in the grand scheme of things. We did speculate that they needed at least a point because they're going to go to Atalanta, who have nothing to play for, but still won't be straightforward. So yeah, massive result from a Parma perspective. But we look at Napoli, and I feel that the run has been very kind on them, yet they still seem to struggle. And I think that goes to the lack of depth, but there's also that lack of sort of respect and maybe trust from a Conte point of view of the players that are behind the starting 11. And we called even the substitution of Lukaku, who was going to come on, Giovanni Simeone. We knew that was going to come on because he's so predictable in terms of who he changes it up. So yeah, he's putting himself under a lot of pressure for this upcoming game. And yeah, dare I say it, I think Calgary could, if they wanted to, could like spoil the party.
Well, we've just seen against a poor Venezia team, but an improving Venezia team. We've seen Cagliari put in a pretty decent performance there, pick up a few goals. I said it to Uncle Sharma on Twitter today, though. I was like, if it was in Sardinia, I'd feel a little bit more confident about there being an upset there. But I think in Napoli, they should be okay, but it's not going to be a straightforward one. Absolutely not. But I wanted to kind of cover the David Neres decision towards the end. Now, I think it was a clear dive. I think the referee and VAR definitely got to the right decision in the end. But Andrea, I think they got to the right decision by accident, because I don't think that was a foul in the build-up, right?
I think the foul was very harsh as well, to be honest. But I kind of see why they had to focus on that, because I think if they gave it solely on the penalty, it would have been very controversial. So I think that it was a escape out. But to be fair, I think the penalty could have been... I think Neres just went in too much. If he kind of stayed a bit more upright and then went down, perhaps it could have been a bit different question. But I think he just looked like he was playing for it rather than anything else. But to be fair, the defender did stick his arm out. He did stick his leg out. It looks like a penalty. Like it could have been. You could. There's ways. There's ways you can fool it, and I think. But it's interesting though, because was it like an obvious error? That's the only thing I'd say.
I think he jumps into him like in the NFL. You see a player trying to jump over someone to get for the touchdown. He jumps into him fully. I was like, you cannot give a penalty for that. There's buying a penalty, and then there's begging for a penalty. Adam, it was a clear move of desperation, right?
Oh, clear as day. Oh, I'm sorry. That's clear as day. He knew what he was doing. He was. If not, he was instructed by Conte to definitely dive, even though Conte wasn't even there. That's the funny thing. Yeah. He was gone by this point because him and Giroud had a little spat on the sidelines, and you could see Conte was visibly annoyed by what the hell had been said. I joked offline that it was probably because Giroud said he's got a wig on top of his head or something like that. The way he was visibly pissed off with Giroud. No, without a shadow of a doubt. And just to add to it, it was definitely a cop-out from the VAR. Yeah. It was definitely because the referee had just pointed to the spot, and you're like, oh shit, we've got to get ourselves out of this because that's not a penalty.
How do we do this, guys? How do we do this? No, I really enjoyed on the sideline. We need to talk about it because I think every manager was sent off last night pretty much. There was a red card in pretty much every single game in Serie A. But I really enjoyed the kind of shit-eating grin on Kivu's face as he was looking at Conte. He was a proper smug little grin as Conte was losing his mind, which was unbelievable to see. Yeah, it really... Those last 10 minutes just turned so chaotic, so chaotic. And it kind of built into it. Andrea, do you think it was because they could see what was happening in Milan as well, and how hectic the ending was in the San Siro, that it just fed across to the Napoli players as well?
Yeah, definitely. And again, Inter were winning at a certain late stage in that game as well, so that would have put a lot of pressure. But on top of that, even the small things like the offside goal that Inter got, late on, news could travel that it actually counted, people could have, so again, misinformation sometimes can affect as well, and it happens in football like this. So even in Serie A, it happens lower league, it happens in Serie A as well. But yeah, no, I think the tension was definitely felt because I feel like uh, that last kind of 5 minutes of that game, it just went complete desperation. And I think, to be fair, the penalty was a symbol of that as well. But yeah, I think it was disappointing for Napoli because I feel like the game was still in their hands despite because Parma didn't really offer much. Napoli just had to control the game, try and take the time, see if they get a winner. If they don't, and see what happens. But I think on another day they might have got the winner on another game. But again, in this particular game, I think it just affected them so much that they lost their kind of composure in the end, and it was unfortunate because I think the game was still there for them to take.
And then Adam, lastly on this, kind of Conte's comments on the race afterwards were quite interesting. So he said, the Scudetto, it would repay me for everything I've poured into this year. I've given it all. I'm also very tired. I'm just about making it to the end of the season. Naples is a beautiful place, but the expectations are beyond what's realistically possible. We've kind of talked about him already having 1 foot out the door. This seemingly is like 2 feet and 1 shoulder out the door at this point. Like, that is a mental comment just before the last game of the season, right?
Yeah, it sounds like he's been there for like 20 years, doesn't it? And it's just,
I'm telling you, these stints are getting shorter and shorter, man. Like,
barely 9 months. Yeah, the guy is definitely indicating that he's leaving, right? I think regardless of if they win the Scudetto, I think he's definitely out the doors. I personally feel that it was an odd appointment given it's De Laurentiis, but also I think he's just probably highlighted what the issue is with Napoli and that ownership with De Laurentiis because it's very difficult to have like a sporting decision on what you want to achieve down there. It feels like you have to go by what De Laurentiis wants to do. And that's the reason why so many managers have turned down the opportunity to manage at Napoli because of De Laurentiis. So, it's funny how his comments always come out every week. It's something that's an injustice. And this time it just feels like, he's maybe putting himself out into the window just to show that people that he's available in the coming summer.
Conte back in black and white, I imagine, next
probably.
season, but we will see. Let's move on to the other game at the top then. A few more goals, a bit more excitement. Arnautovic is now officially a god in Naples, I believe. They've announced him as their newest deity. But Inter 2, Lazio 2. Andrea, you kind of alluded to it. This game was in Inter's hands, and then they gave away a penalty that everyone was really upset about, but I thought was pretty much a stonewall penalty.
Yeah, it was a clear penalty. And even the goal they scored that they were complaining, it was a handball, it would have been a penalty again as well. So, yeah, I think both decisions were correct. But, yeah, again, another game where Inter... and again, it's just shocking because Inter last season, like this stuff would have never happened. They would have got over the line. But this has happened quite a few times now, and this could end up costing them. But again, it's a game where they will look at it with Napoli dropping that they could have took that lead and go into that last game. So it's such a shame for their sake because this was probably the moment to win it. And I think, like you alluded to, I think for Napoli to drop points against Cagliari is going to be really difficult. So I think it will be sore for Inter. Just it was such a massive opportunity.
And that opportunity from Arnautovic at the end, Adam, like this is just how long we've talked about the fact that Inter shouldn't be relying on players of the quality of Arnautovic. And it's, of course, that's the moment that could cost them the Scudetto, is him just not being able to sort his feet out quick enough.
Yeah, and really that kind of summarises the issue at Inter, isn't it? It's just a lack of depth, and when you have got players like Arnautovic stepping in, they can't really finish off the chance that you want them to do. Surprising, he really snatched at it. He didn't really have that control in front of goal, and I suppose that's the reason why Inter, not only that, but I think one of the reasons at least why Inter probably had a tough season already, and it feels like they're losing things quite easily at the moment. There's a lot of, and I'm sure we'll summarise it towards the end of the season when the season is concluded. But I feel that this is one of the things that maybe Inter have to go into summer, just recharge their batteries and rethink how they do things. But certainly, they didn't make it easy for themselves, did they?
And Andrea, has there been a more clutch player at the end of this season than Denzel Dumfries. He is popping up with some huge moments for the club. Another bullet header marauding into the box. He's just been absolutely unbelievable in the second half of the season. A player that they've tried to sell in basically every transfer window, and he's been absolutely massive for them, like another big goal for him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to go on to that as well, he's a player that wasn't really starting in previous seasons as well. He was always on the bench coming on the last 10 minutes. He was doing that type of job for Inter. So again, the rise has been really impressive. But again, when you look at him, he has all the attributes. He's very physical, very tall, great on the ball, can defend just as well as he attacks. And these goals he's adding to his game is just going to increase his value to this team. So yeah, really impressive. And again, he's finishing the season strong, which hopefully could help Inter at the end of the Serie A campaign, but also the Champions League final as well coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. I might have to put a bit of money on him to score in the Champions League final, I'll be honest. Might have to stick a couple of quid on that. But Adam, a mixed day for Bissek. He gets the goal, but does give away the penalty. It's just sloppiness from Inter that's kind of been indicative of their defence this year, right?
Definitely. I think obviously that's been one of the areas where we've kind of called out the lack of depth. I think, Bissek is still a player that is developing personally. I think he's still developing his own game, but he even alluded not so long ago that he's not great in front of goal, but that was a hell of a finish. But equally, like you guys have already called out in terms of that kind of decision for the penalty, you have to wonder why he kind of leaned in the way that he did at that very moment. I know it's split-second decisions. That's what we're talking about, a split seconds. But it's just a little bit of misjudgment, maybe naivety on his side. And I'm sure experience will be gained from this as well at the same time. So, look, I still think he's a bright spark in terms of bright future ahead of him. And ironically, he's another one that you mentioned about Denzel Dumfries, but also Bissek was kind of rumoured to be one of those that was kind of floated around to make some funds for Inter. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in the summer with him as well.
And in continued post-match conference news, there was none from Inter. They all refused to speak to the cameras and come out post-game because they were so furious at the injustice from the VAR decisions. Like, Andrea, we talked about it, how we thought, like, the decision, why have they done this? It just makes them look so classless.
Again, it's one of those where it's not the first time they do this either. Yeah. They're one that very do this, but they do this a lot. But again, I don't get especially when it's clearly correct decisions as well. I think they need to go through with it, review the game after, and then make the comments after they want to. But again, it doesn't change anything. The game's done. Get on with it. Be professional. The fans want to hear you as well. You got to, there's a lot of things that come with these press conferences as well, which are important. So it's a shame, and it just gives that kind of bitter taste to them. If they go on to win or lose, whichever, it won't. It does put some sort of bad light, despite them having potentially an amazing season. So it's a shame, but again, it's a common thing that they've done before, and maybe it's just the entitlement of being a big team that they just see themselves as, when it doesn't go their way, that it's just like all toys out the pram kind of thing. But it's not the way it should work, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought it was really disappointing it's just disappointing to see, really. But, Adam, we do need to give Lazio credit. They came back twice, and this was a huge point for them in their race for Europe. Like, this was a big game for them as well. And, of course, it was that man, Pedro. Talking about clutch players, he's always there when Lazio need him. But it showed incredible fight and what they're able to do on their day, right?
Yeah, Pedro's really an underrated operator when you think about what he's done for Lazio, and not just this season, but previous seasons as well. But you've got to give a lot of praise for the way that they went about it in the second half in particular. Obviously, just on the strike of half-time do they go behind against Inter. And they still are fighting for that fourth spot themselves. So, we were expecting this to be not a straightforward game for Inter. And you have to say, players like Guendouzi really did stand up in that second half. They gave a bit more fight in that midfield. It's through Guendouzi, for example, that allows them to get into the game, because it's then subsequently a ball into the box that Pedro is managed or able to kind of hook into the back of the net, and that gives them a bit of faint hope. But the penalty was ice cold as well. Just the way that he was able to compose himself in that moment and score the equaliser. Lazio have offered this all season. They just need to work on their consistency of doing it. But Lazio well deserved for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 3 draws in their last 5 now with 2 wins. Like, they're just not quite able to convert, to get that extra goal to get the 3 points. But it does keep them in 6th on 65 points. Of course, Napoli and Inter, it's as you were, 1 point between them heading into the last game round, which is going to be on Friday night. So put that in your diaries, because that is going to be absolutely box